Welcome to Spoonful of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them.
The compassion that you guys have really shines through.
Rachel and Tina cultivate a sense of comfort.
It was such a rewarding experience.
They were great hosts.
It was amazing. You are so kind.
Spoonful of Strength has given us this great platform.
They were so welcoming.
Here are your hosts, Rachel and Tina.
Welcome to this week's episode of Spoonful of Strength. This week we are talking about healing with hobbies, and our guest is Abe. He's going to be joining us talking about his neurodivergent, mental health, and he's also a therapist that has some out-of-the-box therapy modality that he is also exploring. So if this is your first time tuning in, I am Tina. I have fibromyalgia. I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor. I have some chronic back issues, just a lot of multiple type of things going on, as many of us do. And my wonderful sister-in-law is going to tell us about hers.
I am Rachel. I have progressive MS. I also have been a type 1 diabetic for over 25 years. And some other smaller chronic illnesses. We're happy to have you here today. And like Tina said, we're going to talk about healing through hobbies. So what does that mean? That means sometimes after chronic illness, whether that be because you have to stop working or you can't get around maybe as well, finding hobbies that will help with your mental health, as well as sometimes with your physical health.
I think hobbies are an important part of managing and maneuvering through chronic illness, at least for myself, definitely for my mental health. How about you? I think both of us kind of explored new hobbies as we started down this path.
Yeah, I about 9 months after I had to stop working, I was driving myself insane because I just went from a job that was like 70 hours a week and traveling to nothing. And so I got on Pinterest and I taught myself how to make a wreath. And I was like, oh, well, that was fun. Let me make another one and let me make another one. And then I had too many wreaths and not enough doors. And so I put one on Facebook Marketplace and it sold. And I put another one on and it sold. And then I started making those 5-foot leaner signs that you see outside that say welcome or whatever. And those started selling. And so then I ended up opening up an Etsy shop and selling my wreaths and signs on the Etsy shop and also through Facebook Marketplace. And I did that for a good couple years. And it was good for me to feel like I was contributing a little bit financially, but also just keeping myself busy, keeping myself active, and I guess giving me a little bit of sense of purpose. I had a lot of pride in my job. And so it made me feel good that people liked my wreaths and my signs, and that, I had a following of people that would order from me each season. And so for me, it fed my heart to feel like I was doing something well, I guess. And you have also dove into crafting as well.
Yeah. I started out when I was off work during my chemotherapy treatments for a number of months. I started working with making tumblers, with glitter and epoxy and everything, and delved headfirst into that. Those really took off. And then eventually I wanted to get away from working as much with resin, based on just because of the challenges that entailed. So I got into sublimation, finally pulled the trigger on sublimation. So I do a lot of different sublimation things. And it's funny because as we're sitting here recording, I also just started dipping into beadable items. So I'm sitting here making beaded little like flower pot garden stakes. But I think it's, again, for like with you, it gave me a sense of purpose, and a sense of, I guess, accomplishment, because when you're working for somebody else, you get that feedback of if you're doing a good job, when they appreciate the work you're doing. But when you're sitting at home, you don't get quite that cheerleader of, yay, you did a wonderful job cleaning the house. It's just not the same.
No, it's not the same.
So yeah, like you, it's like I started making these and I'm like, I can't have I don't need 30 different tumblers in my house. So our running joke now is that every time I come up with a new item, I'm like, Dave's like, well, you're going to be really busy as soon as you post these new things. Because everybody is, like you with the wreaths and the door signs. It's just, you get that niche of solid customer base. So
yeah. And it also, having hobbies, can improve your mood, even have physical benefits. As I was making the signs and getting orders in, I would have to go to the lumber store and I would have to go to the floral, like Hobby Lobby, things like that. So it really helped with, I just seemed like I was in a better mood. I was getting a little bit more physical activity. And then, it came to a stop, at least for me, where I couldn't physically keep up with the pace of it. And I wasn't very good at managing my time. And when I had an order, I wanted to get it done as quickly as possible, just in case I didn't feel good the next day. And then doing that just led me into a spin. So I had to shut that down. Now that's been probably 2021, I think, was when I stopped. And, I took a couple years off. And then, of course, this year started up the Spoonful of Strength Etsy shop, which I made a couple good decisions in that of being able to create the designs myself, but then having a printer to actually do the physical work and the shipping and all of that. So I've gone back into it, but I've also made some good decisions that are not going to put me in that same position of overdoing it physically. So if you haven't checked out the Spoonful of Strength Etsy shop, it's just spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. I have to plug that, because, we had an Instagram question posted just asking what your hobbies were. And I do want to mention this one. Jess.lausmedical_journey says she does cross stitching. And it's funny, I used to do cross stitching. I used to love it. My grandma taught me how to do it. I am getting old and, vision up close is hard. And so I haven't done it recently, but that is something that's very soothing, very calming. Have you ever done anything like that?
I did. I used to cross stitch too. But again, like you, my eyes can't handle that quite as much. So, my hobbies have definitely changed as I've, trying to make them easier, but still, and I do a lot of vending shows and things like that. So I'm also transitioning into, as I'm dealing with more and more back issues this past year, I've realized that I need to lighten my load, so to speak, with the vending and how much because a lot of times I'm doing it at dog events, which with Dave's allergies, he can't come along with. So I'm usually setting up on my own and tearing down on my own. So I'm shifting to like more lighter weight items versus all the cups and things that weigh heavy. But yeah, just keeping the mind, any hobby that keeps the mind engaged, really.
Yeah. And you can find almost anything on YouTube or Pinterest. So like what I did, I just wanted to make a wreath for my front door. And I do better with videos than I do reading. And so you can find so many videos that just walk you through it. So whether that be crafting, also painting, I am not talented when it comes to drawing or painting, but that's a great outlet as well. If you have an artistic flair, or even learning a new instrument. We are going to be talking to Abe here in a little bit. We're going to bring him in, but from his bio, we found out that he uses games as therapy and in some of his practices. Tina, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's interesting how I've been hearing more about it as I have an old coworker as well. The game, like many people know it, has been around many, many years, Dungeons and Dragons, and there has been a lot of research going on right now of the benefits of Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing type games as a way of therapy, almost like a group therapy. And as I was reading one article, it was talking about how, some people, some people that have suffered trauma, and or PTSD, which, I feel like that could be a big factor for many of us with chronic illness as far as going through everything and a little bit of anxiety and stress. Though that it can be hard to talk about it, but like with Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, you create a character. So you could easily create a character that gives them that background of what you went through or what you're struggling with as a way of talking it out through play. So it can make it, they kind of do that a lot you hear a lot about that with like play therapy with children. And so they're starting to realize that, play therapy, so to speak, in adults or adolescents can also be very beneficial.
That's so interesting. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but my son does. And I think that's so creative because I think, especially for younger people, they may not be open to the traditional therapy of talk therapy. And so to be able to incorporate something that maybe they play on a regular basis, I think that's just ingenious of to be able to bring something in like that.
Yeah, to be able to reach others in ways where they may be difficult to reach.
Yeah.
Yep. Your husband also played. The first time I ever played D&D was when I was younger. So my brother, your husband, actually was a D&D player. He's the one that got me playing initially when I was younger.
We've been together for 25 years, and I don't think I've ever seen him play. So he's probably pretty rusty at it, but
probably a little rusty. But
yeah.
But I mean, and that's the thing. It's, healing through hobbies. It doesn't mean you have to be crafting. It doesn't mean you have to be a painter. It doesn't mean you have to be a writer. It's whatever hobby you have. KJ5 McCarthy on Instagram said that their hobby is pool, and more pool. So love swimming, and that's a big hobby for them.
And that's a great hobby for people that maybe have physical challenges because it's a lot easier on the joints and the body.
Yeah. So it makes you feel active again. That's one thing I'm struggling with is I need I feel like this past 5 weeks with my back, I've just been so inactive because the things that I usually like to go out for hikes and I haven't been able to do that because I'm afraid of hurting my back even more, or I'm just not able to, like, just sitting in the car and driving anywhere to hike has been bad. But water therapy, would be a great way to get out and still feel active. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I went through a period probably earlier this year where I was really enjoying puzzles. And that's something that for me didn't require a lot of physical movement. And but it was something to kind of keep my mind going. And gosh, there are Facebook groups out there of people who puzzle, and there's like library swaps. So if you have like an old puzzle that you have already done, you can go into the library and swap out, and it doesn't cost anything. And you just, my library, they're like, I don't care if you brought in 2 and want to take 5, just keep them coming. And so that is something that I've done in the past. Now, invisible underscore condition said that he loves baking, which I like baking too. My waistline does not. But also I have struggled a lot recently with cooking. And I think probably 3 times in the last 2 weeks, I've messed up a recipe because I either misunderstand, I put in the wrong ingredient or whatever. But that's a great hobby, especially if you have loved ones that you can send the cookies and the brownies and all of that too. But I don't know if I ever told you this, Tina, but last year I did some volunteering at our local humane society, and that was really fun. And
I didn't realize you did that.
I don't remember why I stopped. It was a little bit of a drive, but literally my job was to go in, sign in, and go play with kittens and like play with them.
Well, that's a tough job to do.
Oh, it was too. I really wanted to be involved with the dogs. But with my cane and my balance, there's a lot of dogs that may jump, and that wasn't possible. So I would go in and, even if it's just an hour, and just sit and play with the cats in the cat room and, give them a little bit of loving. And so that's something definitely that I enjoyed.
Another feedback from our Instagram post, Aligned K8 said writing or learning something new, like learning different languages, reading, and that could be either I read a lot, like pleasure reading, like I don't read a lot of I'll read some self-help as well, but or just something like sitting in nature, and and you could even pair that together, sitting in nature and writing. You could start a nature journal or something like that. Those are always fun to look back on.
And even journaling is, if you're undiagnosed or you're having new symptoms, even keeping a wellness journal or a symptom journal. I've done a gratefulness journal before. My therapist had me do that, where you just write, I think it was like 5 things that you're grateful for each morning, just to try and keep kind of a positive attitude going forward. But yeah, I think those are great. Those are
also really nice for like when you're struggling, if you're in that mindset of just feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, as you grab that gratefulness journal and look back, and then sometimes that kind of helps shift the mindset of going, oh, you know what, there is a lot of things to be thankful for.
Yeah, that was helpful. and I need to probably get back on that. But yeah. What's your favorite hobby that you do when that you have done since having chronic issues?
That's a good question because I feel like I have a lot of hobbies and I bounce depending on how I'm feeling. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my crafting is always my big go-to. I've always been a hiker even before the chronic illness. But I feel like that also has shifted on my mindset of my purpose of going out there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my crafting, it just the items that I do or the themes of things I do just may vary based on how I'm feeling or what I'm wanting to focus on. But
Yeah.
I feel like disappearing into my craft room has been my biggest thing.
Your go-to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think we're ready to bring Abe in and discuss his journey with mental health. He's going to talk about ADHD and some neurodivergent, as well as being a therapist. So let's go ahead and bring in Abe. While you're on your phone, come on, I know it's in your hand. Head on over to Spoonful of Strength's Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. That's spoonful with 2 L's. We have a wide variety of t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and so much more. Anything in the shop can be customized based on your illness. We have sizes from extra small to 5X and many colors to choose from. The best part is most items ship within 2 business days. So head on over to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. Well, thank you, Abe, for coming and talking with us today, and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a massage a couple hours ago, and my body is still limp noodle, and it feels great.
If you fall asleep on us, we'll have to yell at you or something.
Listen, I just had dinner. We're good. You
got a full belly and a massage, and we may just have to wake you up. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm past the I'm sleepy portion of post massage.
Oh, good.
And
good.
Okay, I'm human again.
Okay, good, good. Well,
just
let's
the
start.
Relaxation.
Yeah. Yep. Let's start by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and anything that you might want to share, and then we'll get started from there.
Oh, certainly. So my name is Abe. I live in the Philadelphia suburbs, Bluebell to be precise. I've been living in the Philly area my whole life. I currently work out near King of Prussia. I work as a therapist. I specialize in working with adolescent, teen, and young adult clientele with a variety of, struggles. I specialize with anxiety. I have a variety of competencies, such as working with chronically ill clientele, LGBTQIA plus clientele, depression, general life issues, general transitional life issues. And I have a niche specialization working with geeky clientele and using media like anime, manga, video games, and D&D as therapeutic tools. So, yeah. I also really like video games, and I have a cat, and she is my world, and I love her.
What's her name?
Her name is Besmara.
Oh, so cute. So cute.
I love the I know that the D&D as a therapy is kind of newish, and I love that came out. I'm a player. It's been a while since I've played our campaign. But because it's the typical everybody's in for a couple months, and then it's like herding cats to figure out a time for everybody to play.
And then everyone's schedule changes, and it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, but it's such a that, and I just love how they are developing tools that resonate with those players and the video game players that helps in the therapy modalities.
Absolutely. It's interesting. We often in the field talk about play therapy as a form of therapy for children. And I remember I was attending a webinar on this topic one time, and something that was really interesting, because the webinar was talking about therapeutic application of D&D, and the speaker, something he said that really kind of struck me was that in our culture, there isn't really much in the way of socially accepted forms of play in adulthood. When you're an adult, the extent of play is, I don't know, maybe you go to the casino here and there. Maybe you throw around a football. And whereas when you're a kid, well, that's all different stuff. And so D&D as a game is very applicable to every age range and becomes this socially acceptable form of play at any given age, which opens it up for the application of these concepts to adults.
Right. Yep. Yep. And actually, Rachel, I think the first time I ever started playing D&D was with your husband, my brother. My brother, well, like when I was little. I could sit there and talk D&D with you all night long, but that's not why we brought you onto the podcast.
So, Abe, you're here to talk about some mental illness. Can you talk a little bit about your history with mental illness?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. So being properly diagnosed and treated later in life has been a lot more my experience, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners, a lot of the people you have on here have a similar experience of. They get diagnosed with whatever they get diagnosed with later in life, and then that leads to them kind of recontextualizing a lot of their life. And that's been a large part of my own personal voyage with this over the past few years. So I've been in and out of therapy across my life. I always thought I had ADHD. Something just it felt like I just every time I would hear about it, read about it, learn about it, I'm like, that really resonates for me. And I always noticed I always had a little difficulty kind of staying present in a lot of situations. And I always thought, well, I couldn't have ADHD. I'm not bad enough, because the cases I saw were a lot more dramatic. I remember I think it was like 8th grade, there was this one kid in my class who I think was my first exposure to, oh, hey, ADHD exists in people. This kid, had impulse control issues, as an 8th grader with ADHD will. And what really kind of struck me was there was one time we're all in class together, everything's normal, teacher's talking, and he just stands up and goes, and, in the back of my head, I'm thinking what? That's odd. Okay, whatever. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not that bad. I'm not, interrupting this class to make nature noises. I'm not doing this and this and that. I just have a little trouble focusing. I guess I have a little bit of ADHD. I don't know. So I never pursued it. It wasn't until college that I started to realize, hey, wait, moving away from the ADHD and over into the anxiety and the depression. So I started to realize, hey, wait, I struggle with anxiety. There's a word for this. Over time, that kind of became more part of myself. I came to better learn about it and deal with it over the years, both in my voyages becoming a therapist and then being a therapist. And then fast forward to 2020, the world collapsed and a lot of my symptoms got worse. And in particular, I started struggling significantly more with focusing. Now, it's tough because the way I like to put this, when it comes to ADHD and a variety of other mental illnesses, a lot of symptoms overlap. So often when it comes to ADHD, in the context of certain other disorders, you got to kind of rule certain things out, treat certain things before you can look at the ADHD. So I wasn't sure, like, oh, well, is this ADHD? Is this the anxiety? Is this something else? What's going on? Because I I, like all the other therapists, had to go virtual for all of my clientele so we don't die. And it was hellish for me. It's Rachel, as I was telling you earlier, where I am in my career now, I no longer take clients that are exclusively or primarily virtual, with rare occasional exceptions, certain exceptions. However, it aggravates my symptomology immensely. Fast forward to about 2022. I came to a realization of, you know what, I should see a psychiatrist for this. Because I had seen a psychiatrist once a few years prior when I was going through some stuff in my life that greatly aggravated my anxiety. And that didn't really go too far. I also didn't talk to that previous psychiatrist, hey, maybe I have ADHD. I just said, hey, doc, my anxiety's really rough. Can we talk about this? So I go to meet with this doctor, who I am now still seeing. Fantastic. He does great work. And so he diagnoses me with major depressive disorder or depression, which, clinically speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the term depression as a diagnosis no longer exists. It's just MDD or major depressive disorder. In the way that anxiety is not a diagnosis, generalized anxiety disorder, anxiety disorder, NOS, not otherwise specified, etc. But so getting back to it, it's diagnosed with major depressive disorder, social anxiety disorder. Eventually, once he confirmed the diagnosis, ADHD inattentive type, and what was the other thing? Sensory integration disorder, which was very interesting because I'd never heard of that. I haven't talked about this in a while.
What is that?
So it's basically the clinical term for you've got sensory issues. So like when you see somebody with autism, for instance, how they will have difficulty with certain textures. That is issues with sensory integration. Your brain doesn't properly process sensory input correctly, and as a result, it causes issues. And that's me. Very common with a lot of neurodivergence, particularly in the context of ADHD and autism.
As far as the sensory, like sometimes I feel like I get like a sensory overload almost, like, if I'm bombarded with too much noise or things like that. Is that kind of along the spectrum, so to speak, of the sensory integration? Or can you explain a little bit more about like what that entails?
So that,
for some,
generally speaking, I haven't done too much research into that. That has not as much been something we focused on treating in me as much as it's, okay, now we have a word for this. And this is very much hey, okay, well, this is in the context of the ADHD, and it kind of explains the sensory issues you have. Now, regarding what you were saying, I don't know. I would say yes, it would fall under the umbrella of issues with sensory integration. Because I'll be honest with you, before my psychiatrist said this to me, well, it's funny because he specifically wrote them all out in front of me and showed them to me. And I looked at them and I said, what the heck is sensory integration disorder? I had never heard of it in my life. And then every medical professional I mentioned it to was like, I never hear about that in the context of adults. I only hear about that in the context of small children. So it was very interesting.
Do you feel that as, I guess, over the years, it has changed to where we're looking more at, the older adults that have struggled with this for so many years, but they were just undiagnosed because it wasn't like, I'm 55 years old. ADHD when I was in school was not a thing. It was the bad, as usually the bad kid, so to speak, versus the undiagnosed kids. So I am noticing I have a few friends that, have recently gotten diagnosed as adults, and of ADHD. So is it just that, that it's more, do you feel it's more like society's acceptance, or that there's just more awareness of it? So now as adults, we're like, oh, this is what I've always been struggling with.
So it's a combination, everything and more. It is partially that, yeah, this is now becoming more understood, accepted, and destigmatized. Part of it is that with that understanding and awareness, more of the average people are going to learn about it and say, hey, wait a minute, that sounds like me. Maybe I should get checked out. Furthermore, as we come to understand these diagnoses more and more, our diagnostic criteria changes, and as such, for people like me, the clinician, it's easier for us now to understand and point these things out. So, to give you an example of the greater understanding here. So part of it is we've come to learn that, hey, wait a minute. So, because historically there was ADD and ADHD. Now, as of, I want to say the DSM-5, I think, I can't remember for the life of me, it's now ADHD with the 4 subtypes, which is inattentive, hyperactive, combined type, and not otherwise specified. So basically, I can't focus. I can't focus while also going wee, and who knows? That's a vast oversimplification, but I think y'all get what I mean. And then another factor is that these resources are now more available. It is much more accessible now than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago to get help for this, to get treatment for this, to get assessed. All of that is so much more accessible. It's not where it needs to be. I'm by no means.
We also want to talk about your history of major depressive disorder. Has that been a constant throughout your life, or more ebb and flow?
That's a really interesting question. I would say that I'm still kind of trying to figure out that full time frame. I will absolutely say that, it ebbs and flows with what's going on in life. As with most disorders, it is either aggravated or soothed based on environmental situational factors. I will absolutely say that for me, the depressive symptoms have flowed much more greatly over the last 4 or 5 years, more particularly since the pandemic. So
yeah,
I would say that it's always been in there, and it has not been as dramatic as it had been at the point when I started seeing a psychiatrist. And granted, once again, looking at the spectrum of these things, my struggles with them in the grand spectrum were not that bad. I remember having a conversation with my therapist at the time, and we were talking about the possibility of medication for me and stuff like that. And what he basically said was, I don't encourage medication for my clients unless their mental health is getting in the way of their ability to go to school, go to work, or socialize. And some people, a little bit of some medication can be an incredible aid to them. So for instance, when I started on an antidepressant, it helped me so much. And even just a low dose of it.
My stepdaughter
Join Spoonful of Strength on Instagram, a community open to everyone. Whether you have a chronic illness or support someone who does, you are welcome at Spoonful of Strength. You'll get preview clips of the upcoming episodes and insight into my world as a spoonie. That's Spoonful of Strength, Spoonful with 2 L's, on Instagram.
All through, I look back, I've been in her life since she's getting ready to turn 28. I've been part of her life since she was 6, and I'm trying to look back and think of when we started noticing the anxiety that she struggles with, even to this day. Even with medication, it's still, it's still a daily struggle for her, and it's so difficult. But definitely, it was definitely, those middle school, we probably started seeing it in that middle school years, and in high school, I think, was when we finally were able to, because of course, we still had to deal with, get her mom on board with going, okay, we need to look at this, because we can't send her off to college and not be able to function alone.
Middle school tends to be where I see an odd commonality of people start to really, their whatever mental illness they've accumulated really starts to kind of show its head. And I always say, I don't trust anyone who says they had a good 7th grade.
Yep. Do you think that there's a stigma behind mental illness, especially with men?
100%, yes.
That is difficult to talk about, and that's why it's so important to bring you in to talk about mental illness, not just that, but also the men's side of that.
Absolutely. You could do an entire episode of a podcast on this topic. I'm confident plenty of podcasts have. There's layers to it. One big layer that I regularly see, that I, in my work with my clientele, seek to change, is, boys growing up, and then men as adults, are not really given allowance to feel their full variety of emotions. It's either, if you are a boy, then you are either happy or you are angry. Are you crying? Are you sad? Well, you need to toughen up. You're being a little baby. Blah, 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 blah. You're scared. Oh, a little scared baby. And these are our emotions. All serve a utilitarian purpose for us as people. They all serve to help us. And what we see with men in our culture, boys and then men in our culture, we see they are not able to feel and utilize these necessary emotions, and it holds them back. It causes issues. It causes unnecessary issues. And at worst, it causes major mental illness down the road.
Yeah. They're not given the tools to deal with the emotions.
Absolutely. And then furthermore, there's the stigma in our culture of, men asking for help. Men are encouraged to be independent and be the problem solvers. And I see a lot of male clientele, and it gives me great solace to see that, because this is boys and men who are pushing against that and saying, okay, well, I need help. I can get help. And part of that help is talking about and communing with and understanding and utilizing my feelings.
Tell us a little bit about the work that you do with those with chronic illness and integrating the spoon theory.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I don't have like major training in, yes, if a client comes in and they have a chronic illness, then you do beep, beep, beep. It's more of between variety of what I learn on the job in my life. It's aided in my ability to help my chronically ill clientele feel seen, heard, understood, and safe. Because a lot of chronically ill people end up in a therapist's office or a doctor's office of any sort and get essentially gaslit about these things. And I, as a clinician, work to be the one clinician who actually says, oh, okay, cool. Let's understand this. Let's look at how this factors in. Let's look at the brain-body connection. I always, with my clients, whether or not I know off the bat they have any chronic illnesses, I always ask, do you have any chronic illness? Blah, 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 blah. And if they say no, or they say, I don't know, I always encourage with my clientele, make sure you get a blood panel done next time you're at the doctor, blah, 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 just to make sure there aren't any biological factors influencing this. Because all the personal exploration and coping skills in the world will only go so far if your body is producing insane amount of cortisol when it's not supposed to. That is fighting a bear with a toothpick.
Yeah.
It's a mild exaggeration, but you get what I
mean. Yeah. And I've been in therapy on and off for like 8 years, and a lot of it is just the anxiety or the depression that comes with the chronic illness. So it's the anxiety of what is tomorrow going to bring, and am I looking at down the road being in a wheelchair, or it's the depression of losing the person I once was, or the things that I can't do, and things like that. And so I know for me, therapy's been wonderful, but I would imagine that there's a lot of commonality with people with chronic illness versus just somebody that is a healthy person, but just dealing with the anxiety and everything that it brings,
Absolutely. It's a whole other layer in that.
Yeah.
And, I feel that more clinicians need to keep it on their radar that don't. And it's frustrating because a lot of clinicians don't even screen for that stuff. And like I said, if they're going in saying, all right, cool, so you're having depression. All right, I want you to do And then if they do these things that the therapist says to do outside of session and then inside of session, and if they continue having issues because let's say their thyroid is messing with certain chemical balance in the brain, then often in some of those cases, we see with the client, they say, well, what am I doing wrong? Why isn't this working? What's wrong with me? And that's why I firmly believe in the importance of getting that full picture of a person.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that before, but I think that's really important to get that done, to see if something else is going on, because it is so important. I mean,
yeah, it could be something as simple as, an overactive or an underactive thyroid that there's just so many things underlying things that can go undetected that could be causing some of the problems as well. Do you feel, I have a personal opinion on this, do you feel that the doctors that are treating those with chronic illness need to do a better job of encouraging them to also seek out therapy if needed, or really giving them that those supportive resources that are out there?
So the simple answer is yes. The whole medical field needs to do better. Granted, I want to say on that note that bedside manner is now more focused on in medical schools from what I'm hearing. It is so important. especially for clientele dealing with chronic illnesses, major illnesses, something that may progress to something worse down the line, as you were saying, Rachel. And so one thing that actually gives me a lot of optimism, more and more general practitioners are doing light screening for mental health struggles, particularly depression and anxiety. And like the fact that I've had clients who showed up in my office because their primary doctor was like, hey, you got too high a score on this test. Maybe you should see a therapist.
Yeah.
So to kind of expand on your question there, I do see this with primary doctors. I see this sometimes with gastrointestinal doctors because of that whole like brain-gut connection, how anxiety and a variety of other mental health struggles can aggravate gastrointestinal struggles, if not cause them outright. So as we learn to understand that more, it gets brought into the equation. That being said, it very much depends on the clinician, and it becomes difficult because some clinicians will look at this and say, well, I think it's just anxiety. Oh, yeah, you're having these gastrointestinal issues. Maybe it's just anxiety. Go see a therapist. And just kind of dismisses them. And that, sure, anxiety is probably aggravating the gastrointestinal issues in there. However, it's difficult because, yes, sometimes these things aren't just insert mental illness. Sometimes it's both. More often it's both.
Yeah.
And so treating the both is so important. And that's why I fully agree that more doctors should be looking at mental health as part of their equation, and when appropriate, referring out for that angle so that the individual can have this full treatment team around them attacking the problem from all applicable angles.
Yeah, because I know even for myself, I have a couple things that have not been diagnosed, and even just dealing with an undiagnosed illness can bring a lot of anxiety and all of that. So as we have to finish up here, what would be a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's struggling mentally that maybe doesn't have access or funds to see a therapist? Because unfortunately, sometimes copays are higher or they're not covered at all.
So for people who are on public assistance, there are resources. They may not be the best, but I'm a firm believer in any port in a storm. And by God, there are some gems in these places. I was one of them. So, furthermore, I would say support groups are a great thing. I fully acknowledge a lot of people don't like group. A lot of people don't like group therapy. I valid. I respect that. Also, like I said, any port in a storm. If you know that you are struggling with anxiety of some form, and you find out that, let's say, I don't know, the church that you occasionally attend runs a support group for anxiety, go. Do your best to at least give it a try. Try to at least do 3 meetings. Unless you go and it's just that abysmal of an experience, give it at least 1, maybe 2. Beyond that, the library has free books, and there is a wealth of wonderful books on these topics, more and more each day. In particular, now, I don't know whether or not you'll find these in libraries, but on the subject of acquiring books, there are a lot of books that either are or have workbooks, worksheets in them. So there is a more active component to it beyond just, okay, I'm going to read this book. A lot of really good podcasts on this topic, all these topics. There are lots of resources on the internet. You just got to be very careful about what you look at. Cough, cough, social media, cough, cough. TikTok. I'm not going to get on my soapbox right now. And definitely, to the best of your ability, if you are going to the internet for resources on this, look at where the information is coming from. If it is coming from somebody who is a doctor, who is a psychologist, a licensed professional, licensed professional counselor, which is what I am, LPC, licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical social worker, licensed mental LM. Every state has a couple different designations of this, but if you are reading an article on dealing with anxiety, for instance, and the person who wrote it has no credentials, be skeptical. Don't necessarily dismiss it outright, but be skeptical. Be aware, be careful, and expand your search. And if what this person says lines up with other stuff, especially other stuff from licensed, learned clinicians who are connected to a licensing board that makes sure that they're not just some loony person who put a sign on their door that says therapist or life coach or something like that.
Yeah.
These licensing boards exist for a reason, and as much of a pain in the butt as they are, they serve to protect the populace in that way.
We appreciate you coming and talking about your experience and a lot of information, a lot of great information.
Thank you so much.
We just appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us.
It is a treasured opportunity for me to have questions asked of me and to have that script flipped.
Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate that. This is a topic that needs to be discussed, and we want to do our part as well.
The mental health aspect of chronic illness has just been something that has been really important, that we've talked about a lot. So it's great to have Abe join us, as a mental health practitioner.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I feel like Abe was like a wealth of knowledge of everything of neurodivergent and mental health. And I love how he touched on the men's mental health, which we have an episode probably next season where we're going to invite a special guest in to talk more about men's health. But I just felt like there was so much information, useful information that he had. What do you think?
It was nice to have someone talk about some things that we haven't talked about before. Like, we haven't really touched a lot on men's mental health or the neurodivergent community. And I love that that he uses his his struggles as well with being neurodivergent to want to help those that are dealing with that.
Being able to, as a therapist, use what he's learned to help others is just wonderful. So another great interview, and we have another wonderful episode coming next week. We're going to start off by talking about traveling as we're nearing the Christmas holiday. We're going to give some tips and tricks on traveling while you have chronic illness. And in part 2, we're going to talk with Chloe. Chloe has multiple chronic illnesses, as many of us do. And so she's going to come on and talk about how she manages all the chronic illnesses that she's currently dealing with. and it's going to be another great episode. We are nearing the end of season 2. We have, can you believe it, 3 episodes left for this season. We're going to end on New Year's Eve, and then we'll take a small break and be back for season 3. So we hope that you have a great week, and we look forward to talking with you next Tuesday. Take care.